Hi, my name is Benedicta Afi Agboche. I'm an intersectional feminist and an advocate against gender-based violence. For years, I have done my advocacy through my writings, which is poetry and storytelling. Now, as part of my MA program, I am embarking on this project, which is a podcast engaging men in ending gender-based violence. So I am still using storytelling as a tool for advocacy, but it is in the form of a video podcast. This podcast is going to bring us expert opinions, lived experiences of gender-based advocates, and the whole point is to center male voices and for men to engage each other and critique their behaviors, and of course to recruit male allyship in ending gender-based violence against women and girls. Join us on this episode, on this journey. It's going to be a 4-episode podcast, and the theme for the podcast is Protect Her, where men are empowered and motivated to be protectors of women and girls so that we can end gender-based violence. Welcome to Protect Her podcast. On our first episode, we are going to define the term gender-based violence. What makes gender-based violence different from general violence? And with me in the studio are experts and professionals who are going to tell us in their field of work or their point of knowledge what gender-based violence actually means. I'm going to give these gentlemen the chance to introduce themselves to you, and then we'll take the conversation from there. So to my very left is Mr. Gideon.
Okay, so I'm Gideon AJ Malto, and I'm a gender and youth advocate. I work in the youth and gender space. Thank you.
All right. Welcome to Protect Her podcast, Mr. Gideon. Dr. Hassan.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Seth Hassan. I'm an obstetrician gynecologist. Glad to be here.
Happy to have you. Nancy.
Yes, my name is Eric Nancy. I always like to say Nancy like walking. I'm a clinical psychologist.
All right. So we'll start with Mr. Gideon. Tell us the difference between gender-based violence and general violence from your knowledge.
Okay, so gender-based violence, or GBV in short,
yes,
it's harmful acts that are directed to individuals based on their gender or their socially ascribed roles in a society.
Okay.
And the key point is the fact that it's based on the gender. So general violence can occur to anyone. Anybody can be affected by general violence, but gender-based violence is based on your identity, either as a man or a woman, targeted.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So, you've talked about the concept, so let's bring it down. What are some forms of violence that can be called gender-based violence?
Okay, so you can have sexual violence, which can constitute defilement and rape. You have emotional and psychological violence or abuse. And then you can also have physical abuse or violence as well, constituting gender-based violence in general.
All right. So even though you define gender-based violence broadly, like you are making it gender neutral, because this podcast is basically about ending GBV against women and girls, and the SDG number 5, which talks about gender inequality, also talks about the fact that systemic gender inequality, that's even one of the reasons they want to end gender inequality, because the systemic gender equality, according to UN Women, is the cause of gender-based violence. And so, even though you've defined these terms neutrally, I want you to talk about them like in terms of women.
Okay.
So, sexual violence in terms of women, and then, of course, you will talk to us about consent.
Okay, so GBV against women. So this will be a systemic harmful act against people who identify as women or girls, just by the fact that they have socially ascribed roles in societies. And also there's a power dynamic that interrelates in this particular kind of violence. And the power dynamic can come in many forms. It could be an intimate partner, so a man and a woman in a romantic relationship, a marriage. It could happen in a workplace, a boss and a subordinate, where the subordinate is a woman. It can happen in the classroom, teacher versus student, where the student is a girl or a woman. And so any kind of violence or harmful act that is perpetrated against a woman, just based on the fact that she is a woman, constitute gender-based violence. And the key element is that there is already an unequal power imbalance between them. And where with the power imbalance, we are talking about the fact that the person has more authority. And based on that authority, they enact certain abuse or harmful acts against them.
Okay. So when you mention physical violence, sexual violence, like explain them, all the things you've mentioned.
Okay, so physical violence in this context with women is where someone causes bodily harm to a woman. So it could be beating, basically. So causing harm. So using any sort of tool, could be a knife, a blunt object against their body. That's physical violence.
Okay.
And then sexual violence is where one takes advantage of a woman or a girl without their consent, right? In a very violent manner, right?
Okay.
So this constitutes rape, defilement, and every other kind of sexual act that has not been consented to.
So what differentiates rape from defilement?
So defilement is usually a legal category for sexual violence that has been perpetrated onto girls under the age of 16 in Ghana.
Okay.
Yes. So anyone who is under the age of 16 who has been violated sexually, the Ghanaian law specifies that as defilement. Okay. Anyone above 16 who has been violated sexually, the law in Ghana terms that as rape.
So is there such a thing as marital rape? Because you mentioned intimate partner violence, and then we are talking about rape. Do we have something called marital rape?
Yes, there is such a thing as marital rape. But to touch on marital rape, we have to come to a particular concept called consent.
Okay.
And with consent, it's a clear, voluntary, and mutual agreement between parties to get into a kind of activity. It could be a physical activity, it could be a sexual activity, it could be anything. Okay. That's what consent means. When it comes to sexual intimacy, consent here would mean a clear, voluntary, and agreeable something that has been agreed upon between two sexual parties to go into sexual activity together. So that's what consent is. So it has to be clear, it has to be mutual, it has to be agreed upon. So if these three things are not working in tangent, then you do not have consent. Okay.
So before I talk to Nancy, I will ask you, because we are still on marital rape. I mean, maybe any of you can answer this too. I mean, in a marriage, couples owe each other conjugal duties. And so where do you draw the line between owing your partner conjugal the right to sex or something, and then like, where does it become rape?
Okay, I think maybe I'll try and tackle that one. When you talk about marriage, you're talking about two individuals who have decided to form a bond, to live together. There is consent baked into marriage. First things first.
Okay.
However, when you talk about sexual intercourse or any form of sexual act during marriage, there's still consent. It doesn't mean necessarily that because you got married, understanding the terms of consent is implied 24/7. Married couples will tell you that there are some days where they are not mentally there. There's some days where they are not physically there, but their partner may proposition them for sex.
Okay.
With both men and women, but especially with women, I always tell my patients, sex begins in the mind. It's not just a physical thing. It takes a bit of effort to prepare to have sexual intercourse when you are not in the mood. If at some point one partner breaches this understanding, there is the question of consent being put aside. It comes up, to be honest. It's upon this that I believe the term marital rape came about. Some time ago, it was a given. People walked with the assumption that, a woman cannot talk about marital rape. It's a husband. How can your husband rape you?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we've come across very unfortunate incidences which result, physically speaking, there's classically no difference between somebody outside of wedlock getting sexually assaulted and then this woman who is supposedly married to her husband. So I think we've reached a point, even with the legal aspect. I'm sure at some point you talk to some legal luminaries, they can shed some more light on this. Consent in marriage is not implied 24/7 to preclude the incidence of marital rape. So it is still something that is there. And I think it's still something that falls under this gender-based violence, which we need to talk about. Okay. It is relevant.
So while still on consent, and as you are speaking, from a professional point of view, there are some arguments that if a woman's body is not ready for sexual intercourse, she wouldn't react to whatever you do to her. And so if she reacts, it means she consents. Like, what would you say about that?
To be honest, this is one of the most sensitive aspects of sexual assault and rape. The human body is a very interesting work of art. One of the challenges, probably if you were to speak to a rape victim, as unfortunate as it might be, one of the deepest sources of shame in some of them, because rape is such a heinous act, because it's not just a physical thing. It has mental, emotional, some people would even say spiritual connotations. Your body, some of the challenges that some of the victims talk about later on when they open up is feeling betrayed by their body. There's a certain, do I say, pattern to sexual intercourse. In some cases, during any of these incidents of sexual assault or rape, the person's body might respond. But mind you, we are well aware, as odd or difficult as it sounds, if you are in the middle of a sexual act with anybody, and at any point they withdraw their consent, your duty is to end it right there. Otherwise, it might not have started as sexual assault or rape, but it has graduated into that if you still continue. At that point, the person's body might have responded, it might still be responding the way it should. But it does not mean that sexual assault is not occurring. I will admit, however, that it is a dicey thing. It's a dicey thing because more often than not, when these things happen, they happen behind closed doors, between two people. And unfortunately, probably one of the most unfortunate occurrences associated with this is there have been people who have cried wolf. Maybe after having the sexual intercourse, they are spurned by their partner, or they reject the premise upon which they initially had sex, and then they now feel like, oh, I wish I hadn't had sex, and therefore they now talk about sexual assault. All of these things come together to muddy the waters. But it is possible. Let's take it home. It is possible that the body might respond. Okay. When we talk about lubrication and maybe even some of the responses, etc. But once the original premise of consent did not carry on throughout, from the beginning up to the end of the sexual act, then some form of sexual assault has happened.
Okay. So
just to touch on what you said, it's so typical. So you have people coming to you and then they say, oh, I didn't want to do it, but my body just gave into it. And even the part about giving in, sometimes some give in simply because they are physically overpowered. So the fact that you are assaulting me and I just let loose and I'm like, do whatever you want, it doesn't mean that at that point I've consented. I think that's where a lot of people get it wrong. Okay. Because a lot of people talk to me about their experiences and they're like, he was stronger than me, he held me down. So, I mean, he has already started, let him just finish. And then guys mistake that for, oh, when she stopped fighting, then she started liking it. But that's not the point at all. She stopped fighting because you are physically stronger than her, not because she wanted it.
Okay, so I have heard stories where a woman will say, the man says, stop fighting, it will only hurt. Mm-hmm. Like, why do you think, as a psychologist, is it that the men don't understand the concept of consent? Or, like, as a society, you are not teaching boys what consent means? Because if you are trying to... Intimacy is supposed to be between, again, two people who want to do it, right? Mm-hmm. For pleasure. That's supposed to be the point, except those who want to make babies. And if I am fighting you, it means I don't want it. So why are you telling me that I should stop fighting? It will hurt.
That's a lovely question. And earlier, I thought this would be easy to answer until I started recounting some experiences that people had shared with me. One of the reasons why it seems that it's difficult for men to understand the concept of consent is, I think, upbringing is a huge one, and somebody's environment. So if all that's been drummed in my head is that, oh, that's for girl there, if you force her small, she will allow you. If that is the person's mentality, then to him, his concept of consent is very, very different. It goes back to the example I just gave. So his concept is, well, I need to force her till she gives in. So to him, that is where consent starts from.
Okay.
Right. So just that wrong thinking from the start of what consent is supposed to be. And then there are those who are probably more educated and realize that consent is when the person gives you either a verbal consent or whether it's a nod. Like, there should be a very clear understanding that, yeah, I want to do this. There have been so many instances where guys have told me, oh, she was rejecting it. And then they're like, I'm not going to continue. Because at what point do you come and tell me that, oh, you've actually taken advantage of me? I think Trevor Noah made a very clear example when he said, so he had gone out on a date with somebody and they went back to his place or something. I don't remember the full story. But then she was a little bit intoxicated. Uh-huh. And then she wanted to engage in stuff. And he's like, nah, because of the state in which you are, we cannot proceed. And I've heard so many guys give similar stories that because of the state in which you are, you cannot give verbal consent.
So that means if a woman is intoxicated, consent can't happen.
No, she doesn't have the capacity to give you consent in that space. Because maybe if she were lucid, she wouldn't allow you to go further. So unless the person is in a very clear state of mind and knows what she's doing, knows the consequences of her actions, then we can say that, oh, consent has taken place. But if the person is not clear enough, it's in your best interest not to proceed, no matter how much you want it.
So what if she's not intoxicated? You didn't physically force her, but initially she said no, and then you kept asking for it and asking for it and asking for it until she said, okay, fine, do it.
I'm probably going to defer that to Gideon to answer. I think it's a very tricky situation, but from my POV, the best thing for you is once you are told no, a no is a no. No matter how much you force or coerce somebody
into it. What if you give her things, give her gifts, Like, she said no at first, but because you know she likes food, you keep buying her food hoping she'll change her mind.
Well, if I keep giving her food, did she say yes? Did she agree? I mean, we're talking about
Eventually
consent, not the
yes.
process of consent. So at what point does she say yes?
Okay.
So if you're talking about giving the person stuff, then we could equally say that courting somebody is all a means to engage in sexual relations. Because when you're courting someone, you may gift the person stuff, may give the person money. Does it mean that I'm doing all this for sex?
Maybe.
Even no matter what the goal is, the point is, if I'm giving you all this stuff, when I want to have sexual relations with you, you need to say yes. If you say no, it's a no.
Okay.
Okay, so I would like to come in here. So as I said, it's like consent is voluntary. It has to be clear, and then it has to be mutual.
Okay.
So it means that it's freely given, it is specific, and at the same time too, it's informed.
Okay.
Right? So the person giving the consent is already informed about what act we are going to engage in.
Okay.
So if they do not know, or they are not aware, it means that then they are not informed. Example, you could be in the act and then you'd want to explore anal.
Okay.
At that point, there's no consent for anal. There was consent for vaginal intercourse. So if the person says no to anal, they've not given their consent. Or the person is a little apprehensive about that. They've not given their consent. You can't, it shouldn't be forced. But I want to go back to the thing Nante was talking about upbringing. The whole point or issue with consent is that for a society like Ghana, and sex is not a thing we talk about.
Okay.
So to both sexes, the young boy growing up and the young girl growing up, sex is taboo, and the rubrics, the rules around it is not clearly spelled out. So as the guys get as you try and woo her, continue to woo her, she eventually agree. The female child is also taught that you withhold till he has proven. So it's a game that both are playing. So like a game theory of sorts that both are playing. And this is what is bringing about the disasters we are beginning to see, because we are all not clear on the rules of engagement. We are working with faulty rules of engagement. Okay. And for the men, because we live in a patriarchal society, the rules of engagement favors them the highest, because women will lose more.
Okay.
They have lots to lose when it comes to sexual intercourse. There's pregnancy, which can halt whatever plans you have for yourself for like 9 to 10 months. And that can actually steer you off whatever goals you had. If you were a girl who's going to school or something like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So just to add quickly to what Gideon was saying, I just had a perfect example that someone shared with me.
Okay.
So he said someone came over to his room and then he tried making a move, and he started fondling her. And then she says she's no longer interested. In fact, she said she wasn't interested. So eventually he stopped. Then she goes back home, and then sometime later they are texting, and then she says, "Oh, but if you had tried harder, I would have allowed you." Right.
Yes.
So then the challenge is, if a guy hears this once, he thinks that this rule applies to everybody. So again, the rules of engagement.
Oh, okay.
So it's very, very different for people. That's why it needs to be stated very clearly. Once the person says no, whether she would have allowed you eventually, which is also back to what you were saying earlier, what if you try?
Yeah.
Once you hear no, just stop, just to be on the safer side.
So he's saying if we educate the boys more to understand that they are not entitled to a woman's body, then we can help them understand what consent means and why they shouldn't cross boundaries. Yes. But you're also saying we should teach our girls to mean their no.
Your no should always be a no.
Don't come back and say, if he had tried harder, I would have allowed.
I think that is an isolated event, but I'm saying that I've also heard it from several guys saying that.
You are not wrong, because when I was in the north, I taught literature and English, senior high school level. Okay. And we read Wole Soyinka's The Lion and the Jewel.
Okay.
And at the end of the book, there was a bit of a confusion. What happened between the chief and then the young girl? Was it consensual or was she raped? And I had conversations with my students about it. And the boys told me that girls feel if they give in easily, they are considered cheap.
Yeah.
So the man or the guy has to push and, be persistent or coerce them into it. That is when they feel like they will be valued, because
it's a very dangerous narrative too.
Exactly. And I had to tell them, no. The moment she says no, whether or not she wanted it and she was, don't do it.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, if she says you raped her, you did rape her, and you can go to jail for that. Yeah. So the moment you hear no, it's not worth it. You saying, let me, she wants to be valued. Where would you?
So to add that to that, this is not an isolated thing. The cat and mouse thing play, especially in our cultural Ghana, it's something that has been going on for a long time. Okay. And I think we also have to make rules when it comes to that. Basically, because I think when it comes to sex outside of marriage, we are a bit apprehensive. And so we've not been able to, as a society, try to map out how this is supposed to go. And so girls are socialized differently on how they are supposed to behave before a man can have access to their bodies. And boys are also socialized differently on how they are supposed to behave in order to gain access to girls' body. So, and this is making it difficult for us to actually push consent clearly into the space.
Okay. So basically, society has a role to play when it comes to shaping these narratives. All right.
Yeah. Yes, I was going to say, just to touch on that briefly, since you're talking about protect her, almost every female, at least 4 in 5 females I speak to, tell me that, they've had some sort of either sexual harassment or sexual assault experience. And it really shakes me to the core. It looks like, so if you see any girl, there's a likelihood that she has had a similar experience.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I'm not a guy, so it will be, I'm not a female, so it's difficult for me to understand what they go through. But I think, again, it behoves some society to state clearly the rules of engagement, like he said, so that we're able to protect girls properly. Because if guys don't know what the rules of engagement are, then we are part of those perpetrating the acts. Okay. So let us know that this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do.
All right. So we'll talk more about what society has to play, the role society has to play. But Dr. Hassan, as a gynecologist, tell us about some of the ways exposure to violence affects women's bodies. I think you even mentioned to me once that you've treated pregnant women who experienced physical violence from their partners. Would you like to talk about that?
Yeah. It's unfortunate that we still experience cases like this in the year 2025, both women who are pregnant and women who are not. One of the difficult parts of being a gynecologist, especially in our part of the world, is I see cases like this on a regular, unfortunately, and there's no respect of age. 4-year-old, 7-year-old, 15, 20, 35, 45, it runs the gamut. Typically, it tends to be with women within the reproductive age, but at this point, defilement is still quite prone. One of the things that is difficult for us is even when they do bring the patient to the hospital, because then she's my patient and then the victim to the hospital. In a number of cases, I've realized that they come to the hospital maybe for us to give some medical help, and then to document some of the physical manifestations of the sexual assault. Unfortunately, in more than 50% of the cases, probably much higher, depending on where you are, the family tends to want that documentation so that they can strong arm the perpetrator, either to give them some money or rarely maybe to even marry the girl or something, but primarily to extract some money from the person. I don't know what the actual statistics are, but I wouldn't be surprised to hear that maybe about 70 to 80% of cases of sexual assault do not go through the due process. It's not reported to the police. Or even if it's reported to the police, somebody from somewhere shows up and it's like, oh, let's go and talk about it at home. And it ends right there. I'll never forget there was a 7-year-old who was brought to me one time. And I was so invested in this. I did the report, everything, gave it to them, come back on this day, give me feedback. I never heard from them again. So our lack of follow through, it cheapens the act of sexual assault because it's, what does it take? You get out of it. And in most cases, these tend, as usual, we all know, close associates. Rarely do you have a stranger just showing up. So it's the uncles, it is the siblings, it is the fathers, it's the cousins, it's the, we live in the same vicinity, some co-tenants. It's always that. So I think right from the get-go, what we can do is to try and conscientize the children. If the children know that this thing is not right, there's less of a chance that they will fall prey to these people.
Okay.
From my end, the psychological damages, it's insane. It's insane. I stopped at some point. Sorry. Sure.
Do you think domestic violence cases receive similar attitude as sexual violence cases, where they wouldn't report whoever is doing the abusing, or they would withdraw the case from the police or something?
You're right. Personally, at least with the little bit that I've seen, I don't believe domestic violence cases even get reported to the family. If it gets reported to the family, 9 out of 10 times it will end right there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, if you are lucky, they might bring in a counselor, they might bring in maybe their spiritual head, pastor or something, to come and talk about the issue. But other than that, it doesn't go anywhere.
Come to the hospital, does the hospital owe it to make it a police case?
This is where things become a bit murky. There, strictly speaking, isn't a law on our books that mandates us to take something like that up. Strictly speaking.
Okay.
The best we can do is to advise the victim and the people who they come with to take it up.
Okay.
And even then, our hands, most of the time, they are tied, because the number of times the patient will come to you, I fell down some stairs. I know what a stair fall is like. One particular case that comes to mind, there was a pregnant woman who was about 7 or 8 months. And she had an issue with her husband, and he's usually quite violent. So on that particular incident, when he started becoming violent, she was able to rush out of the room and lock him in. And she lived in the house with his mother and whatever, I think a sibling or so. So she went to go and call his mother. This is what your son is doing, blah, blah, blah. And the mother was like, oh, why? And then the mother went to go and open the door. He pounced on the woman. He beat her with a belt, the buckle of his belt. So she came with a gash. And I told them, like, madam, as for me, I'll treat you. But you need support. Call your people. She hadn't told any of her family members because she felt she was protecting her husband. Even at that point, we had to spend time to counsel her, for her to call her brother, her mother, and then they came and they were like, you know what? We are discharging from the hospital. You're stable. You're fine. But you're not going back into that house. You go with us. I never heard from that woman again. So we don't really have much in terms of follow-up.
Nancy, so as he has said, I think he said something, the victim is trying to protect her husband. There have been cases where it appears victims or survivors, it's like they feel a responsibility to protect their abusers. Like, why do you think that is? What kind of trauma does violence, of whether sexual or physical, leave on the person who suffered it?
Right. So there's a psychological defense mechanism called identifying with the aggressor. So when somebody perpetrates an act of violence on you for a prolonged period of time, then it's either you begin to sort of have some sort of pity on the person, one, or you try to identify with them so that they don't harm you more than they actually are doing now. And when it comes to violence, the kind of psychological toll it has on people, I don't think we've even begun to scratch the surface, because people experience some sort of PTSD from that. So even if they are successful enough to leave that relationship, it really ruins other relationships for them, right? And the pain, the anxiety, the depression that follows these kind of experiences, it's like an inbuilt trauma. And now the least thing, they either want to withdraw. I met with somebody who, after such an experience, she had not been able to be in a successful relationship for years. Right. And then now that she got in one, she was having so many issues, and then recounting the past. If I had not gone through this, my life would have been different. So that's 15, 20 years after the initial incident. They are still living a life that is based on the experiences of the past.
Which means it's not something you can just get over.
No, you actually need proper help to be able to get over a very serious. I mean, it's serious. You need proper help.
To tag on a little bit on that, okay. You're talking about the psychological manifestation. Sometimes it can actually become psychosomatic.
Yep.
What it means is it starts in the brain, but then it has physical manifestations that we are not able to find an organic cause. A number of times in my practice, it comes across as women who find it difficult to have intimacy with their husbands. Sometimes the typical sexual response, they can't get it. And there is this form of pain during sex that we cannot track to anywhere. In not less than 50 to 60% of the cases I've seen of such a nature, it triggers me to start asking questions as to especially the origin of their sexual experience. A lot of them, when they were young, before they even started having relationships, there might be a history of some form of sexual assault. And from then on, they might have even healed from it. But when they are at a point where they now need to express that sexual aspect of their life, then there's a challenge. And this just keeps going on and on. They might have even repressed the memories of some of these things. So you ask, and the first time you won't get the right answer, but then later on, after some probing, I don't remember what happened. Typically they just blank that thing out. But if those roots are not uprooted, it's very difficult to manage these cases.
And in terms of even protecting women, when it comes to sexual violence in particular, sometimes they become either hyposexual or hypersexual. And that's very heartbreaking to see. If you see somebody who they think they like sex or they think they love sex, but it's a trauma response. So you're in a relationship with somebody, this person really loves sex, but it's not because they love sex, it's because they've suffered some trauma. Okay. Right? So that's one thing people don't realize, the impact of abusing. That's why I feel consent is so important, because you are leaving a certain scar that you think your sorry can fix. This is the person's life now. Your sorry will not really change anything. You've just set the person up for problems, right? So maybe people should be considerate of that as well. And I feel anybody who watch the podcast, if you've had any sort of traumatic experience, gender-based violence in any of the forms, you should definitely try to seek help if help is offered.
All right. So we spoke about everything. We are wrapping it up. But before we go, I think we started talking about how society sometimes enables, because the culture of silence, right? We don't talk about sex in this part of our world. And so because of that, ignorance, people do things out of ignorance. But then, how does allyship mean to you? What does allyship mean to you as a male ally? You've spoken about how it troubles you when you hear of such cases. You've also spoken about experiences you've had in your medical profession that's, troubled you. And so as a society, and this is a task to men, because according to UN Women, only 1 in 10 prevention initiatives are targeted at men. And yes, we tell women to be safe. We tell them how to dress. We tell them how to talk to men. When I was a child, I learned about rape when I was barely 8 years old. Some people came to our neighborhood with posters, infographics, teaching us how to fight, where to kick a man if he corners you, and all that. But there was nothing telling boys what consent meant, how to protect women, or how not to even abuse. Because if you're not abusing girls or women, then we don't even need the protection, right?
Right.
And so, as a society, what does it mean for men to be allies in ending GBV? So that we can have a society where women are not suffering from all this physical and psychological trauma because an ignorant man, not all, we know not all are ignorant, but, so what does allyship mean to you, all three men here?
Well, I think, there's this thing, you are making the woman better. You are bettering the lot of the girl child. The question that a lot of these NGOs and well-meaning individuals unfortunately fail to ask themselves is, you are bettering her for whom? You cannot improve one without improving the other. It will you'll be shooting yourself in the foot. I think charity begins at home. And I always say that this generation of young fathers coming up, we are in a critical position. We are the best that you can find to change things. Okay. Quite a number of us were raised by single mothers. Quite a number of us have some emotional connection that our fathers, we never really saw our fathers had. A lot of us are trying to do better with our children. This is the time where we need to draw men into the fold. Unfortunately, a lot of these initiatives, like you said, they have sidelined men. And unfortunately, whether by design or error, they cast all men in a certain light. I think this is the best opportunity to call men on board, find out what their ideas are like. This podcast is a very good first step, I think. Find out what their ideas are, what their challenges are, and help them to become advocates in the society. Because it's monkey see, monkey do. If I see my father being very generous, very open, very accommodating to his wife, to my sisters, chances are I'll do the same to my wife and my daughters. And I would expect my son to see me doing it this way and then to follow. But if you have a child who always sees his father beating his mother, I promise you, he's going to beat his wife. It goes without saying. So, best case scenario, get a lot of today's crop of men on board, especially the reasonable ones, those who are willing to come to the table and talk, who do not believe that they are victims and therefore they don't want to have anything to do with female empowerment, etc. No. Get the men who are willing to come to the table, open a conversation, let them be advocates for you. These are the best men that you are going to find right now. This is the best time for this to be done. That will really help.
Okay. So, I'll ask and then the other two take it. So, what will a man do to be an ally? Or what should a man do to be an ally?
I think it's just the consciousness of the fact that we have an understanding that women are people too. I mean, I think it's so basic. Sometimes I struggle when people talk about being an ally, feminism. We're talking about the human being as a whole. One party seems to be experiencing violence or abuse more than the other. We want that to stop. So as an ally, my job is to educate other men, which is something I do a lot. And maybe this will veer off a tangent, but sometimes people tell you, but women trigger men so much. I don't think that's the point. The point is you need to understand that a man is obviously, most often than not, physically more robust than a female. Yeah. So violence is not a way to solve a conflict when it comes to a woman. Okay. Just that basic understanding. I feel it's a very basic understanding that everybody should have. I saw a conversation on Twitter, and somebody was talking about the fact that, because he has a sister, he feels for women. I feel that is one way of being an ally. But then a female re-quoted that tweet, and she was like, you shouldn't feel for women simply because you have a sister. And I think both of them are not wrong, but at least that's the start. Identifying with my sister, and so and in extension to all women.
Okay.
I think that's also a start. So basically what I'm saying is consciousness of the fact that everybody's a person. Let's keep our hands to each other.
Thank you.
Okay, so from my point of view, I think allyship starts with being an advocate.
Okay.
Starts with being someone who calls out when things are not being done properly. There's a thing called the bystander effect, and this is where men do see bad things happening, harassment, sexist jokes, or abuse happening to women, and then just stay out of it because this is not my issue, right? And I think most men are good, but most men have the luxury of being bystanders. And that's what we do not want to have. If most of the good men stop being bystanders, then allyship has meaning. Because when you hear a sexist joke even amongst your friends, you can call it out.
Okay.
You call it out not because you are trying to shame the other guys in the group, but to let them know that this particular thing, if taken to its logical conclusion, can go on to harm a girl or a woman.
Okay.
Another way I think allyship should also take on is men in positions of power should be at least educated on what GBV is, the various iterations from sexual, physical to mental and emotional, so that at the spaces where they are, quote, let's say, judges or lawyers, parliamentarians, in these critical positions that can actually shape society, they do not make that critical mistake of creating a society that is patriarchal or blind to the plight of women, because again, they do not see women as human beings. Not because they don't know, but it's an unconscious part where you don't see as human beings. And this comes to mind because of the recent events that happened 3 weeks ago concerning this senior high school headmaster staff and other things about a teacher and a student.
Terrible responses, by the way.
And the terrible responses from people in positions of power. People who are educated should know better. Still going on claiming what was wrong with the victim. Like Nancy said, bad
irrelevance.
It was irrelevant to the situation.
I saw some of the responses. I'm like, for the first time, I was really speechless. So
people in positions of power should have known better, and they couldn't even condemn what was done in that video, and how the victim identified with the aggressor, so that they don't get punished. They could not even see the psychological ramification, claiming the person was holding a cell phone. That was irrelevant to this particular situation at hand. Okay. And I think this is where our allyship must start. We have to hold certain people in positions of power, especially the men, to task. When they make such baseless and foolish statements on air, we should all be able to go out and say this is nonsense, and then it shouldn't even be something we can debate about. And individual men who see themselves as good men do not just bystanders when abuse is happening. Your neighbor's wife is screaming, you know they are hitting her, but it's like, I'm family. No. Even if you are not able to get her to realize that she needs help or get out of the situation, try as much as possible to also report to the domestic violence unit with the police. That you are here there's something happening here and you don't know how to deal with it. They should come and do a wellness check.
Okay.
Yeah. Things like that would actually help eradicate GBV and actually create a society where men actually see women as human beings who can partake in this society that we are all trying to build. Because we can't live alone. We need both each other to live. And one person cannot be oppressed and the other having a time of their life. For how long can we be?
I like that quote. One person cannot be oppressed while the other is having the time of their life. And it appears to be that that's the kind of society we live in. Because of course, systemic inequality, where women are saying we are oppressed, we are being abused, we are being violated. And the men are like, we don't know what the problem is. And so, as the gentleman already pointed out, it's a societal issue. If we want to end GBV, we have to take it from the society, not just individual cases. And the next episode is going to talk about how the media frames GBV as individual cases, and what, as people or creatives who work in the media space, we can do to frame it as a societal issue and find a problem to it. Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you enjoyed it, share it with a man in your life.